Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Details still sketchy, but apparently the guy pledged allegiance to ISIS, ambushed these cops who were out for a jog. That part of France not unfamiliar to ISIS sympathizers, and now people are going to try to figure out, is this part of the migrant problem? Is this part of what?
Too sketchy in terms of details yet, Steve, to tell. I'm reading French media saying now that 2 are dead and up to 12 are injured. And these things tend to get worse as more facts come in. If 12 are injured, how severely are they injured? Will they pass? Sure. And I don't know whether the terrorist, because clearly this is an act of terror, and President Macron is now calling it a terrorist act, whether he pledged allegiance to ISIS before he went in, or whether that was a hostage situation, a criminal situation, and then, whether or not he was immigrant, we'll find out. It's not an area, as far as I know, heavily populated by immigrants. This is like a Walmart kind of store. The the hostage situation evolved. Cops, they're elite units. They're taking the surrounded the Super U. I think all the hostages in terms of these French media accounts are released, except for one wounded cop and one terrorist still in there. But to me, obviously, personally, what it always does in our family, whenever it involves France, it harkens back to November 2015 and our poor daughter being stranded in Paris in that stadium with the suicide bomber igniting their explosives outside, and how terrorizing that was to our family. I just tremendous sympathy for all the families involved, for the dead, the wounded, and now this officer.
So this seems to be a big problem in France.
Well, it certainly is, and the good news, Ainsley, is that with ISIS being so profoundly reduced, the caliphate as a geographic entity being essentially eliminated, that's great, except that some of the fighters from the caliphate in Syria or Iraq, they've got to go someplace. And are they going home? Are they going back to their French roots?
Geraldo, our president talks a lot about immigration and identity, national identity. Is that the problem here in France? They've got unconstrained borders, whether it's migrants or refugees, and then there's a crisis of French identity. What does it actually mean? And if you have radical Islamists not assimilating to the French culture, ultimately you have opportunities for things like this. Do they have their arms around it? What lessons do we need to learn from it?
I think that under the Macron administration, those borders are not nearly as open as once they were. You do have a tremendous immigrant population there, mostly from North Africa, obviously, the old French colonies. This is, in some ways, the legacy of that colonial period, and it has to sort itself out. I do believe the French, you know how they are, Major. They are tough as nails when it comes to fighting crime, and I think that they'll get their arms around this eventually. I think that the days of, let's go easy on them are over in that sense. Maybe we'll have a similar experience here. But I think that what we have to focus on now is we don't know if this was a premeditated, maybe this was a robbery gone wrong.
Don't know.
A stick-up. We don't know yet, although you can count on the melancholy reality. The harsh reality is it will get worse before it gets better in terms of the casualty count.
And we're going to keep an eye on it, but let's talk a little bit domestically about what's going on. The President of the United States made another change in his cabinet. He fired H.R. McMaster, and he is hired as the new National Security Council chief. That man right there, John Bolton, who, just like you, Geraldo, has a big mustache.
I was going to say, Steve, it's about time that the administration has brought to its core a man with a mustache. I was going to complain bitterly about it. I was as close as you can get to a mustachioed advisor to the president. Bolton is a hardliner. We know him very well. We know the ambassador very well. He was one of the cheerleaders for the Iraq invasion in 2003, which ended disastrously, unlike me, who feels very guilty about my support of that invasion back in those days.
At that time, it made sense.
We like to think so. The ambassador, though, unapologetic about it. He still believes it was a good idea. I think it disrupted the entire Mideast, and was still paying the piper for that. Now, why did he do it? I haven't spoken to the president about it. I don't know very specifically. Everything I read is that that, McMaster, a 3-star battlefield commander, Iraq, Afghanistan, a real hero. But as I understand it, he was pretty stiff in terms of his briefings with the president. The president, all right, get to the point. What? All right, okay, I get it, General. But I'm not saluting right now. Just give me the. And Bolton, promises that he's not going to be as hardline as his rhetorical flourishes on this couch maybe indicated he would.
But he's a ferocious. The president.
Ferocious is a good word for him.
Well, the president's wanted to get rid of the Iran deal. A lot of his advisors, like H.R. McMaster, have counseled against it. Now you've got John Bolton, who's been a critic, one of the leading critics of the Iran deal. Do you see this as the Iran deal probably ending as a result of this?
Well, me personally, I hope not. But what I am comforted by is I remember that you couldn't get a more hardline team than Kissinger and Nixon in 72, 73. And yet those are the guys that opened up China, which was our arch enemy, ideological foe. We didn't recognize them. They didn't recognize us. We were at a constant verge of nuclear conflagration. And they made, they normalized relationships with China. Maybe Bolton, the team of Bolton, Trump can do the same with North Korea. I'm less confident about the Iran nuclear deal. I think that once you get away from that deal, I don't know where that ends. And I don't like the prospect of it because Ambassador Bolton, and in that sense, he has synced up with President Trump, has been one of these, preemptive strike kind of guys. And he has promised the president that he's not going to start any wars, and I take him at his word.
Well, you're saying sometimes it takes hawks to make peace.
Sometimes it takes exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Geraldo.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
All right, Jillian's behind you. She's got some more headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. A number of breaking news stories that we're following. So let's start with the Fox News alert. A massive fire erupting overnight on the set of a major Hollywood movie starring Bruce Willis, killing a 15-year decorated veteran of the New York City Fire Department. 37-year-old Michael Davidson leaves behind a wife and his young children, 3 daughters and a son.